Most people think clarity is a personality trait, like some people are simply born with it. They wake up, see the world clearly, know exactly what to do, and then they do it. And then there's everyone else, stuck inside a constant fog of overthinking, hesitation, and unfinished decisions, a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working too hard, but from thinking too much without ever reaching a clear conclusion. But that isn't a personality difference, it's a skill gap. And like every skill gap, it can be fixed. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something about the human mind that many modern productivity experts still struggle to understand. Clear thinking is rarely about intelligence. Most of the time it's about incentives. People stay mentally foggy because, in a strange way, the fog protects them. Ambiguity feels safe. If you never fully commit to a direction, then you never fully fail. If you never make a clear decision, you never have to take full responsibility for the outcome. The fog is not a weakness, it's a defense mechanism. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying to solve a psychological problem with logic alone. This is why so many people think endlessly, but still feel stuck. The issue is deeper than thinking. It's fear disguised as uncertainty. This video is about removing that fog completely using the same strategic mindset that Machiavelli developed by studying power, conflict, and human behavior at the highest levels. Not empty theory or motivational slogans, but the real mechanics of clear thinking, strong execution, and how to succeed without destroying yourself in the process. The first thing Machiavelli would tell you is this: define the real problem, not the obvious one. Most people waste enormous energy solving the wrong issue. They focus on what appears to be the problem while ignoring the deeper cause underneath it. They fight the wrong battle and then wonder why nothing truly changes. Machiavelli saw this constantly in politics. A ruler would spend huge resources trying to crush a rebellion without ever asking why the rebellion started in the first place. He might win that battle, but lose the next 5 because the root cause was never solved. The visible problem was the uprising. The real problem was that the people felt ignored, unheard, and financially trapped. Remove the rebellion without fixing those deeper issues and you haven't solved anything. You've only delayed the next collapse. In real life, this happens everywhere. People distract themselves from anxiety instead of asking what the anxiety is trying to reveal. They work harder inside careers that were never right for them instead of questioning whether the career itself is the issue. They repeat the same arguments in relationships again and again because neither person has identified what is actually being fought over beneath the surface. Clear thinking begins when you stop reacting to the presenting problem and start asking a deeper question. What's underneath this? And sometimes you need to ask that question 3 or 4 times before you finally reach the real issue controlling everything else. The second principle is to separate what you can control from what you cannot, and never mix the two. It sounds simple, but very few people actually practice it. Machiavelli's idea of fortuna was not only about luck or timing, it was about understanding the difference between your own power and the things life decides for you. He believed that confusing these 2 areas creates bad decisions and unnecessary suffering. When you waste mental energy on things outside your control, you weaken your ability to focus on the things that actually matter. It is like trying to carry water in a broken bucket. The water is real, the effort is real, but the result is nothing because the container cannot hold it. This is why calm and clear thinkers seem different during chaos. It is not because they feel less pressure. It is because they quickly decide what they can influence and what they cannot. They focus fully on the first part and release the second part completely. Not because it sounds wise or spiritual, but because holding on to useless worries destroys focus and wastes energy. The habit you need to build is simple. Whenever something goes wrong, stop and ask yourself 2 questions. What part of this situation can I actually influence? And what part is completely outside my control? Then attack the first part with full focus and let go of the second part without hesitation, because worrying about what you cannot change has no value. The third thing Machiavelli understood about clear thinking is that most decisions are not truly difficult. They only feel difficult because emotions create noise in the mind. Deep down, there is usually a moment where you already know the correct choice. You know which difficult conversation you have been avoiding. You know which opportunity you are delaying because of fear, not uncertainty. You know which relationship is finished and which habit is slowly damaging your life. The truth is already there. The clarity already exists. The real problem is finding the courage to act on what you already know. Machiavelli had little patience for hesitation. When you read his work closely, you can almost feel his frustration. He watched powerful rulers who had smart advisors, good information, and clear opportunities, yet they still delayed action. They kept choosing comfort over decisive movement until the opportunity disappeared. Then they blamed luck. Machiavelli did not call that bad luck. He called it weakness of will. He understood that intelligence alone is not enough because many intelligent people still fail when action becomes uncomfortable. Clear decision-making is not only about collecting better information. More importantly, it is about building the strength to face uncomfortable truths and still act on them, even when the action is difficult, even when it costs something, even when doing nothing would feel easier. Before we continue, I need to say something clearly. YouTube recently removed almost every way I could monetize my work because the platform now rewards fast edits, short attention spans, and constant dopamine hits more than content that actually makes people think. So I stepped away from that system, not fully, but the deeper, slower, more honest version of my work now lives on Patreon, a place where no algorithm decides what ideas are too real or too uncomfortable to share. A place where I don't have to turn philosophy into something safe enough for an insurance commercial. So if you want the full experience, click the link in the description or the pinned comment and join the movement. Now, back to the video. Thinking clearly is important, but execution is a completely different challenge. Machiavelli understood this distinction in a way that many modern productivity experts still miss. He believed that poor execution usually does not come from laziness. It comes from divided attention, which is a very different problem and requires a very different solution. A ruler trying to handle 12 major priorities at the same time will perform badly in all 12, but the ruler who identifies the 2 or 3 actions that truly matter and focuses all of his energy on them will execute with precision and power. Not because he works harder, but because his focus is structured in a way that can actually create results. 12 weak efforts do not create 12 victories. They create 12 distractions pulling against each other. This is something many people ignore when talking about productivity and success. We hear endless advice about discipline, routines, habits, and time management. And yes, those things matter, but beneath all of them is a deeper skill that matters even more. Concentration. Real concentration, sustained concentration, the kind that becomes uncomfortable because it demands your full attention on one important thing for a long period of time. Not the task that feels most urgent. Not the task other people pressure you to prioritize, but the task that, if done properly, would create the biggest change in your life. Machiavelli's most successful rulers all shared one powerful trait: extreme focus. It was the kind of focus that made other people slightly uncomfortable. They did not spread their energy everywhere. They did not chase every opportunity or constantly switch directions. They chose the result they wanted and they moved toward it with complete commitment until it was finished. Only then did they move on to the next objective. But strong execution also requires something else that Machiavelli understood deeply: the ability to change your method without changing your goal. This idea is subtle but extremely important. He noticed that many leaders failed not because their goals were wrong, but because they became emotionally attached to one specific way of reaching those goals. When circumstances changed, they refused to adapt. The objective still made sense, but the path toward it had changed. Instead of adjusting, they kept forcing the old strategy because they had already invested too much into it. Letting go felt like admitting defeat. But changing your approach is not failure. In many cases, it is intelligence. The goal should remain fixed. Everything else, the strategy, the tactics, the process, the methods, should stay flexible and should constantly adapt to reality. Reality changes and smart people change with it. The people who execute at the highest level are usually the people most willing to completely redesign how they do something while staying perfectly clear about why they are doing it. That combination is rare. Complete flexibility in method. Complete clarity in objective. And when you study people who consistently succeed, that combination is usually what real winning looks like. Now let's talk about winning itself, because Machiavelli's understanding of winning was far more useful than the version most people believe in today. Most people think winning means defeating someone else, having more than the other person, standing on top, while someone else loses underneath you. And Machiavelli absolutely understood that world. He lived through it and wrote about it with brutal honesty. But he also noticed something deeper. The leaders who defined victory only through competition and domination usually created massive resistance around themselves. Over time, that resistance grew stronger and eventually destroyed them. The more interesting and long-lasting type of victory, according to Machiavelli, was something much smarter, something you could call positional winning. Positional winning is not about one single victory. It is about putting yourself in positions where future victories become easier and more likely. It means making decisions today that increase your options tomorrow instead of choices that feel good right now but quietly limit your future. Every decision either opens doors or closes them. Sometimes closing doors is necessary. That is not the problem. The real problem is closing them without realizing it, without thinking about the long-term cost, and without making that choice consciously. People who think 10 steps ahead constantly ask themselves deeper questions. Not only, will this work? But also, what opportunities does this create afterward? What position will this put me in for the next move? Is this a victory that creates more victories, or one that secretly prepares the next failure? Machiavelli saw this pattern repeat again and again throughout Italian political history. A ruler would achieve something important, but then during the excitement of success, they would make careless decisions that slowly destroyed the strong position they had created. The victory itself was real. Protecting and maintaining that victory was where most people failed. And when we talk about winning effortlessly, the word effortlessly can be misleading. It does not mean winning without effort. It means applying effort with such precision, preparation, and intelligence that from the outside it appears easy. It looks smooth, it looks natural. It almost looks unfair, but that appearance only exists because the hard work happened long before anyone noticed. The preparation happened early. The thinking happened early, the skill building happened early, the positioning, the relationships, the discipline, all of it happened before the pressure arrived. So when the important moment finally came, they were not panicking or trying to prepare at the last second. They were already ready. The struggle happened quietly months or even years earlier when nobody was paying attention and nothing looked impressive yet. People who seem to win effortlessly are usually the same people who spent years doing difficult and unglamorous work with no audience, no praise, and no guarantee it would succeed. They prepared anyway because they understood something important. Performance is only as strong as the preparation behind it. And there is one final thing many people miss about Machiavelli. Despite his reputation as a cold and ruthless strategist, He wrote something deeply human in his private letters that almost nobody talks about. He described the genuine satisfaction that comes from doing something with complete commitment and real skill. Not just the strategic value of mastery, but the emotional experience of it. Of giving your full attention and full ability to the task in front of you and feeling it respond. Of thinking so clearly about a problem that the solution almost begins revealing itself naturally. Of executing something so well that the result feels elegant, not just effective. He was not only talking about strategy, he was talking about what it feels like to fully experience your own potential, to stop living distracted, afraid, confused, or half-committed, to stop operating at half capacity and finally bring your complete self into the life you are already living. That is what clear thinking creates in the end, not only better results, but a completely different experience of life itself, a different relationship with your own mind, a feeling, especially if you have spent years mentally lost or disconnected, that you are finally present inside your own life instead of floating outside it, watching everything happen and simply hoping things work out. Machiavelli built his entire philosophy on one core belief. A disciplined, self-aware, strategically directed mind is not only more powerful than a distracted mind, it is more alive, it sees reality more clearly, it experiences life more deeply, it notices more because it is truly present instead of hiding behind comfortable illusions and unconscious habits. Think clearly, not perfectly, clearly, and execute beautifully, not effortlessly at first, beautifully, and win in a way that keeps building more opportunities instead of winning in a way that only gives temporary satisfaction. The fog is a choice, and so is the clarity waiting on the other side of it. This is the point where most people stop truly understanding Machiavelli and start repeating shallow versions of his ideas. They take the surface-level lessons like trust nobody, image is everything, or the ends justify the means, and they walk away believing they have discovered something dark and intelligent, but they have not understood him at all. They picked up the skeleton of his philosophy while leaving behind the living parts that actually made it powerful. What they end up with is a fake performance of strategy that fools nobody who genuinely operates at a high level. The deeper layer of Machiavelli's thinking was never just about tactics or manipulation. It was about internal structure, about the way a disciplined mind is built from the inside outward, and how that inner structure eventually shapes everything visible on the outside. This is where things become more interesting. Machiavelli often used a concept that translators struggle to explain properly because there is no perfect English equivalent for it. The word is virtu, not virtue in the moral sense, but something closer to disciplined capability, force of character, or controlled personal power. It describes the quality of someone who has trained themselves enough internally that they can act with precision and control the same way a master craftsman uses a tool without hesitation, without wasted movement, and without the inner conflict that drains most people before they even begin. Virtue is not talent. Many talented people completely lack it. It is not intelligence either, because many intelligent people still live in constant confusion and hesitation. Virtue is the result of deep internal discipline. It is what happens when your actions stop fighting against your own mind. You think clearly, then act clearly, without spending endless time trapped in fear, doubt, emotional negotiation, or self-resistance. Most people lose years of their lives inside that internal struggle. And this matters because unclear thinking is usually not caused by lack of information. It is caused by internal conflict. When you are divided inside yourself, when your actions do not match your stated values, when your goal and win in a way that keeps building more opportunities instead of winning in a way that only gives temporary satisfaction. The fog is a choice, and so is the clarity waiting on the other side of it. This is the point where most people stop truly understanding Machiavelli and start repeating shallow versions of his ideas. They take the surface-level lessons like trust nobody, image is everything, or the ends justify the means, and they walk away believing they have discovered something dark and intelligent. But they have not understood him at all. They picked up the skeleton of his philosophy while leaving behind the living parts that actually made it powerful. What they end up with is a fake performance of strategy that fools nobody who genuinely operates at a high level. The deeper layer of Machiavelli's thinking was never just about tactics or manipulation. It was about internal structure, about the way a disciplined mind is built from the inside outward, and how that inner structure eventually shapes everything visible on the outside. This is where things become more interesting. Machiavelli often used a concept that translators struggle to explain properly because there is no perfect English equivalent for it. The word is virtu, not virtue in the moral sense, but something closer to disciplined capability, force of character, or controlled personal power. It describes the quality of someone who has trained themselves enough internally that they can act with precision and control the same way a master craftsman uses a tool without hesitation, without wasted movement, and without the inner conflict that drains most people before they even begin. Virtu is not talent. Many talented people completely lack it. It is not intelligence either, because many intelligent people still live in constant confusion and hesitation. Virtu is the result of deep internal discipline. It is what happens when your actions stop fighting against your own mind. You think clearly, then act clearly, without spending endless time trapped in fear, doubt, emotional negotiation, or self-resistance. Most people lose years of their lives inside that internal struggle. And this matters because unclear thinking is usually not caused by lack of information. It is caused by internal conflict. When you are divided inside yourself, when your actions do not match your stated values, when your goals are based on someone else's definition of success instead of your own, your thinking naturally becomes confused and unstable. You cannot build a strong structure on a weak foundation. Machiavelli noticed that the strongest rulers were rarely the ones with the most flattering view of themselves. They were the ones with the most accurate view of themselves. They understood their weaknesses honestly, not as embarrassing secrets to hide, but as useful information to work with, and they knew where they were vulnerable. They knew where their judgment became emotional. They knew where they needed support. They knew the situations where they were likely to make mistakes, and instead of pretending those weaknesses did not exist, they built systems around them the same way a skilled architect designs around the limits of a piece of land instead of denying reality. The kind of self-awareness creates a different type of clarity, a clarity that does not come from books, information, or analysis alone. It comes from having an honest and stable relationship with your own nature. Then there is another skill Machiavelli believed mattered deeply, the ability to read the room at scale.